She worked in silence for years until she fainted at work. Her boss finally spoke. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to the main character. She arrives at the office before the sun rises and leaves long after the city lights come on. For years, she has worked this way, quietly, carefully, without complaint. Her name is Emily Carter. Most people in the building recognize her face, but not her voice. She is the one who fixes reports before deadlines, double-checks numbers no one else notices, and stays behind when everyone else rushes home to dinner. Her desk sits near the back corner of the open floor, far from the glass offices and far from attention. Emily does not complain. She does not ask for praise. She learned long ago that being reliable was safer than being seen. Every morning, she pours herself a cup of coffee, sets it beside her keyboard, and forgets to drink it. By noon, the coffee is cold. By evening, her hands ache slightly as she types, but she ignores it. She always ignores it. Her boss, Daniel Whitmore, is the founder and chief executive officer of the company. To most employees, he is distant, disciplined, and nearly untouchable. A self-made billionaire, known for his sharp instincts and even sharper silence. He rarely raises his voice, rarely offers compliments, and almost never asks personal questions. Emily has worked under his leadership for 7 years. In 7 years, he has never once said her name out loud. Late one night, long after the elevators have stopped running regularly, Emily remains at her desk. The office is quiet, except for the hum of overhead lights and the faint sound of air conditioning. Her screen glows with unfinished spreadsheets. Her phone buzzes with a reminder she ignores. Her vision blurs for just a second. She blinks, presses her fingers to the edge of the desk, and tells herself to breathe. She has felt this before. A wave of dizziness, a tightness in her chest. She promises herself she will stand up in a moment. She never gets the chance. The room tilts. The light above her flickers. Emily reaches out, knocking over her cold coffee. And then the floor rushes up to meet her. When she opens her eyes again, the world feels distant and muffled. Voices echo somewhere above her. She smells antiseptic and hears the steady beep of medical equipment. And then, through the haze, she hears a voice she recognizes instantly. Low, controlled, unmistakable. Do not move her, the voice says. Call the doctor now. There is urgency in his tone that no one at the company has ever heard before. Emily tries to speak, but her throat is dry. Her eyelids flutter. She feels a hand near hers, close but careful, as if afraid to touch her too firmly. Another pause. A breath. And then, softer, meant for no one else in the room, she hears him say, "I should have noticed sooner." For the first time in years, Emily is not invisible. And for the first time, Daniel Whitmore is no longer silent. What happens next will change both of their lives in ways neither of them expected. Emily wakes to the steady rhythm of a heart monitor and the soft glow of morning light filtering through a narrow hospital window. For a moment, she does not remember where she is. Then the weight of exhaustion settles back into her body, heavy and undeniable. A nurse notices her eyes open and steps closer, speaking gently, explaining that she fainted from severe exhaustion and dehydration. Emily listens without interrupting. She has heard versions of this before, though never in a hospital bed. When the nurse asks how long she has been feeling unwell, Emily hesitates. "A while," she finally says. The nurse nods, as if that answer explains everything. As the room quiets again, Emily stares at the ceiling and lets her thoughts drift backward. Long before the collapse, long before the cold coffee and late nights, there was a pattern she never questioned. She had joined the company fresh out of college, grateful simply to have a desk and a steady paycheck. The work was demanding, but she told herself that was normal. Everyone else seemed to manage. When tasks piled up, she stayed later. When coworkers needed help, she stepped in. When mistakes happened, she fixed them quietly before anyone noticed. Over time, people began to expect it. Emails came late at night with unspoken assumptions. Deadlines grew tighter. Praise went elsewhere. Emily learned to measure her worth by how invisible her effort could be. If no one complained, she was doing well. She skipped lunches. She postponed doctor appointments. She learned how to smile and say, "I am fine," even when she was not. Back at the hospital, the door opens again. Emily expects another nurse, but instead, she sees him. Daniel Whitmore stands just inside the doorway, his suit jacket folded neatly over one arm. He looks out of place here, surrounded by white walls and quiet machines. For a moment, he does not speak. He simply looks at her, as if confirming that she is real, that she is awake. "I will not stay long," he says finally. His voice is calm, but there is something restrained beneath it. "I wanted to make sure you are all right." Emily tries to sit up, instinctively professional even now. He gestures gently for her to stay still. The silence stretches. It is not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. "The doctor said you pushed yourself too far," he continues. "They were clear about that." Emily swallows. "I did not mean to cause trouble." The words slip out automatically, practiced and reflexive. Daniel's expression tightens, just slightly. "This is not trouble," he says. "This is something I should have addressed sooner." Emily looks at him then, really looks at him. In all the years she has worked under his leadership, she has never heard him speak this way. Not to her, not to anyone. "I see now how much you carry," he says, "and how little you have been asked if you can." Emily does not know how to respond. Her chest feels tight, but not from illness, from something else, from being acknowledged in a way she did not realize she needed. Daniel sets his jacket down on the chair beside her bed. "You are going to take time off," he says, not as an order, but as a certainty. "The company will adjust. I will handle that." She opens her mouth to protest, then closes it again. For once, she does not have the strength to argue. As he turns to leave, Daniel pauses at the door. "Rest," he says. "That is not a request." When he is gone, Emily exhales slowly. For the first time in years, there is nothing she needs to fix. No task waiting for her attention. Just the quiet, and the unfamiliar feeling of being seen. And somewhere beneath the exhaustion, something begins to ease. Emily spends the next few days at home, though rest does not come easily at first. Her apartment feels unfamiliar in the daylight, as if it belongs to someone else. For years, she only saw it in fragments, early mornings and late nights, always rushing in or out. Now, time stretches in quiet, unstructured hours. The doctor's instructions echo in her mind. Proper meals, water, sleep, no work emails, no exceptions. At first, her hand reaches instinctively for her phone every few minutes. She checks the screen, half expecting messages marked urgent, deadlines flashing in red. There are none. Her inbox is silent. On the second day, a package arrives at her door. Inside is a simple folder from the company's medical provider, confirming her approved medical leave, fully covered. There is also a short note, written in clean, precise handwriting. "Focus on your health. The rest is handled." There is no signature. She does not need one. Emily sits on the edge of her couch, the note resting in her hands longer than necessary. Something shifts inside her, subtle but undeniable. For the first time, she is not being asked to prove her worth through exhaustion. As the days pass, her body slowly responds. The headaches ease. Her hands stop trembling when she wakes up. She begins to notice small things again, like the sound of traffic outside her window, the warmth of sunlight on her kitchen floor, the taste of food when she eats slowly. With distance from the office, memories resurface more clearly. She remembers the early years, when she believed effort alone would be enough. She remembers watching colleagues come and go, some promoted, some burned out, some praised loudly for work she quietly supported from behind the scenes. She never resented them. She simply assumed this was the cost of stability. What she never admitted, even to herself, was how tired she had become. Not just physically, but emotionally. Tired of being dependable without being valued. Tired of disappearing into her own competence. Midway through the week, her phone rings. This time she answers. It is Daniel Whitmore. "I wanted to check in," he says. "Not about work." She is quiet for a moment, then tells him she is feeling better, stronger, honest, but cautious. "That is good," he replies. "I have been reviewing several internal processes. Your situation made certain gaps very clear." She hears the pause in his voice, as if he is choosing his words carefully. "You should not have been carrying that workload alone," he continues. "That was not leadership. That was neglect. The word lands heavily, but it does not hurt the way she expects. It feels accurate. I am making changes, he says. Not just for you, for the structure that allowed this to happen. Emily listens, her fingers curled lightly around the phone. She realizes he is not offering reassurance. He is offering accountability. When the call ends, she sits in silence, absorbing the unfamiliar sensation of relief without guilt. A few days later, she returns to the office, not to work, but to meet Daniel briefly, as requested by her doctor. The building feels different when she enters during daylight, brighter, less oppressive. Daniel meets her in a small conference room, not his glass office. He gestures for her to sit. I want to be clear, he says. Your role will change, not because you failed, but because you were doing too much of what others should have been responsible for. He outlines adjustments, a redefined position, clear boundaries, a team assigned to share the load, mandatory breaks, scheduled check-ins. Emily listens, stunned by the practicality of it all. This is not a reward, it is correction. I need you here, Daniel says, his voice steady, but not at the cost of your health, not at the cost of who you are. For the first time, Emily does not feel the urge to apologize. She simply nods. As she leaves the building that day, she steps outside into the afternoon sun and pauses. The city moves around her as it always has, but something inside her feels lighter. The silence she worked in for years is finally breaking, replaced not by noise, but by balance. Emily returns to work gradually, as instructed, 3 days a week at first. Shorter hours, no late nights. The adjustment feels strange, almost uncomfortable, like wearing a new pair of shoes that have not yet softened. On her first morning back, she arrives just after 8. The office is already alive with movement, conversations overlapping, keyboards clicking. For years, she was always one of the first there. Today, she notices she is not. At her desk, everything is the same, yet nothing feels the same. Her inbox is organized, tasks are clearly assigned. A shared calendar now exists where there used to be vague expectations and last-minute requests. Her name appears on documents she once edited silently in the background. People greet her, not in dramatic ways, just simple acknowledgments. Good morning, welcome back. It is subtle, but Emily feels it immediately. She is no longer blending into the walls. Daniel Whitmore keeps his distance at first. He does not hover, he does not check in publicly. He allows the changes he set in motion to speak for themselves. But Emily notices small things. Her workload is monitored. When a meeting runs long, someone else is asked to stay behind instead of her. When she finishes her tasks for the day, no one questions why she is leaving on time. One afternoon, Daniel stops by her desk, not to assign work, not to correct anything. "Are you adjusting all right?" he asks. She pauses, considering the question honestly. "I am learning how to," she replies. He nods, as if that answer matters. Outside of work, Emily begins to feel the effects of rest more deeply. She sleeps through the night, her appetite returns, the constant tension in her shoulders eases. For the first time in years, her body is no longer operating in survival mode. But healing brings clarity as well. One evening, sitting alone in her apartment, Emily realizes how close she came to losing herself entirely, not to illness alone, but to the belief that her value depended on how much she could endure without complaint. The thought unsettles her. At the office, Daniel is undergoing his own reckoning. Late at night, alone in his glass office, he reviews performance reports, employee turnover statistics, and internal feedback he once skimmed over too quickly. Emily's collapse did not reveal a single oversight. It exposed a pattern. He sees now how easily competence becomes invisible, how silence is mistaken for strength, how leadership can fail not through cruelty, but through distance. The next company-wide meeting is different. Daniel speaks plainly about sustainability, about responsibility, about the cost of ignoring exhaustion. He does not mention names, but the message is clear. The culture is changing, and it starts with accountability at the top. Emily listens from her seat, her hands folded calmly in her lap. She feels no spotlight on her, no discomfort, just a quiet sense of alignment. After the meeting, Daniel asks her to walk with him for a moment. They stop near the windows overlooking the city. "I wanted you to know," he says, "that this is not temporary. What happened to you was a failure on my part. I do not intend to repeat it." Emily studies the city below, the steady flow of people and cars. "I stayed silent because I thought that was expected," she says softly. "I should have made it clear that it was not," he replies. There is no apology in his tone, just resolve. As weeks pass, the dynamic between them settles into something steady and respectful. Not romantic, not distant, something built on recognition and trust. Emily is still quiet by nature, but her silence is no longer erasing her. It is a choice, not a shield. And Daniel Whitmore, for the first time in a long career, understands that leadership is not measured by results alone, but by who is still standing at the end of the day. Emily does not notice the change all at once. It arrives quietly, the way healing often does, without announcement. One morning she realizes she no longer braces herself before opening her email. Another afternoon, she leaves the office at 5:30 and does not feel the familiar stab of guilt. The habits that once kept her afloat are slowly loosening their grip. Her follow-up appointment confirms what she already feels. Her blood pressure has stabilized. The fatigue that once clung to her has faded into something manageable. The doctor reminds her that recovery is not a finish line, but a practice. Emily understands that now. At work, her redefined role begins to take shape. She is no longer the silent fixer behind the scenes. Her insights are requested openly in meetings. When she speaks, people listen, not because she speaks louder, but because she speaks clearly. Daniel Whitmore watches the shift with careful attention. He notices how she prepares before meetings now, not with tension, but with confidence. He notices how others defer to her expertise, how her presence anchors discussions that once spiraled into urgency and chaos. Most of all, he notices that she no longer disappears. One evening, after a long but balanced workday, Daniel asks if she has a moment. They sit in the conference room, the city outside darkening as lights flicker on one by one. "There is something I would like to offer you," he says, "not as a reward and not as compensation." Emily listens without interrupting. "I want you to help me redesign how this company defines sustainability," he continues, "not as an advisor from the outside, but as someone who understands the cost of silence from the inside." She feels the weight of the words, not as pressure, but as trust. "I will not accept unless it fits within the boundaries we set," she says carefully. A small smile crosses his face. "That is exactly why I am asking." Their conversations grow more frequent after that. Not longer, just more honest. They speak about leadership, about responsibility, about the quiet harm caused by systems that reward endurance over well-being. There is no pretense between them, no need to impress. What grows is not romance, at least not yet. It is something steadier, respect, recognition, a shared understanding of what should never be allowed to happen again. One evening, as they leave the building together, Daniel pauses by the door. "I have spent years believing silence meant strength," he says. "You taught me otherwise." Emily considers this. "I did not teach it," she replies. "I lived it." He nods, accepting the correction. Weeks later, during a company event focused on employee wellness, Daniel speaks again. This time, he names the issue directly: burnout, overwork, invisible labor. He speaks without defensiveness, without distancing himself from responsibility. Emily watches from the audience, her posture relaxed, her breathing steady. She is no longer a cautionary tale. She is part of the solution. After the event, Daniel approaches her quietly. "I need you," he says, simply and clearly. "Not because you endure, but because you see what others miss." The words land differently now. Not as a burden, not as a plea, but as a choice. Emily meets his gaze and answers without hesitation. "Then we do it right." As she walks home that evening, the city air feels lighter. She thinks of the years she spent working in silence, believing that was the price of belonging. Now she knows better. Healing did not arrive as a dramatic moment. It arrived as permission. Permission to rest, to speak, to be seen. And that has made all the difference. The shift between Emily and Daniel does not happen through grand gestures. It happens through consistency. Weeks pass, then months. The company settles into a new rhythm, one that no longer runs on urgency alone. Meetings start on time and end when they should. Expectations are spoken clearly instead of implied. Emily's role evolves steadily, grounded in structure rather than sacrifice. She now leads a small internal team focused on workflow balance and employee sustainability. It is not a glamorous department. There are no headlines or applause, but the impact is tangible. Turnover slows, sick days decrease, conversations change. Emily notices it first in the small things. People leave on time without apology. Managers ask questions instead of issuing demands. Silence in meetings no longer signals compliance, but reflection. For the first time in her career, Emily feels aligned with her work rather than consumed by it. Daniel Whitmore remains measured, but he is no longer distant. He attends the weekly check-ins. He listens more than he speaks. When concerns are raised, he responds with action instead of reassurance. One afternoon, after reviewing a report together, he leans back slightly in his chair. "You were right," he says, about how easily endurance gets mistaken for loyalty. Emily does not rush to respond. "People want to do good work," she says. "They just should not have to disappear to do it." He nods slowly. Outside the office, their conversations expand beyond policy and performance. Sometimes, as they walk through the lobby at the end of the day, they talk about quieter things: the pressure of responsibility, the isolation of leadership, the cost of being needed without being known. Daniel admits, once, that he built the company believing distance protected clarity, that emotion would complicate judgment, that silence was safer. "I did not realize," he says, "how much it also isolated me." Emily understands this more than she expects to. Healing, she is learning, does not only belong to those who collapse. It belongs to those who never allowed themselves to. One evening, after a long but balanced workday, Daniel invites her to join him for dinner. Not as a meeting, not as an obligation, just a conversation outside the walls that once defined them. They choose a quiet restaurant not far from the office. Nothing extravagant, comfortable, human. They talk about their lives beyond work. Emily speaks about her early years, the fear of instability that taught her to overperform in silence. Daniel speaks about building something so large that he forgot to notice the people holding it together. There is no rush, no subtext, just understanding. As the evening ends, Daniel pauses before they part ways. "I am glad you stayed," he says. Emily meets his gaze. "I stayed because things changed," she replies. "Because you changed." He accepts that without defense. From that point on, something shifts again. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but unmistakably. Their connection deepens, built not on rescue or dependence, but on shared values. Mutual respect, a commitment to doing better, not just feeling better. Emily no longer feels the need to shrink herself to fit. Daniel no longer mistakes control for leadership. What grows between them is not born from crisis, but from recovery, from the understanding that healing is not about being saved. It is about being met where you are, and choosing, together, to move forward differently. The moment of calm does not last forever. Change never goes unnoticed for long, especially in a company built on old expectations. As Emily's department gains influence, questions begin to surface. Quiet ones at first, then sharper. It starts with a meeting she is not invited to. Daniel Whitmore sits at the head of the table as several board members review quarterly reports. Productivity has improved. Turnover is down. Employee satisfaction metrics are rising. On paper, the changes look successful, but success does not silence doubt. One board member leans forward. "These adjustments," he says carefully, "they are expensive. Reduced hours, expanded teams, slower timelines." Another adds, "There is also concern about favoritism. This initiative began after one employee collapsed at work." The room grows still. Daniel does not react immediately. He listens. He always listens. "You are referring to Emily Carter," he says finally. The name lands differently now. "Yes," the board member replies. "Her influence on company policy has grown rapidly. Some are questioning whether your judgment has been compromised." Daniel feels the familiar instinct to retreat behind distance, to end the discussion with authority alone. For years, that instinct protected him. This time, he resists it. "My judgment was compromised before," he says evenly, "when I allowed exhaustion to be mistaken for dedication, when I rewarded silence instead of sustainability." The room shifts, not in agreement, but in attention. "These changes were not made because of one collapse," Daniel continues. "They were made because that collapse revealed a system that would have eventually failed many more." The board members exchange looks. The challenge is not over. Later that day, Daniel calls Emily into his office. Not the conference room, his office. He closes the door behind her. "There are concerns," he says, "about boundaries, about your role." Emily absorbs this quietly. She expected it, even if she hoped it would not come so soon. "If this is a problem," she says carefully, "I will step back." The words are measured, professional, but Daniel hears something else beneath them. An old reflex, the instinct to disappear to protect the structure. "No," he says firmly, "that is not what this is." He moves from behind his desk, standing across from her. "This is the moment where I either defend what we are building," he says, "or allow the company to slide back into what it was." Emily studies him, searching for hesitation. She finds none. "I need you to know," he continues, "that I am prepared to stand by these changes, by your work, even if it costs me leverage." The room is quiet. Emily feels the weight of his words settle, not as pressure, but as trust. "I will not be the reason you are questioned," she says. "You are the reason I am certain," he replies. That evening, Emily goes home unsettled, not by fear, but by clarity. For the first time, her presence is not something that must be justified quietly. It is being defended openly. The next board meeting is decisive. Daniel presents data, testimony, long-term projections. He speaks not of compassion alone, but of strategy, of retention, of resilience, of leadership that does not break people to prove strength. When the meeting ends, the vote is narrow, but final. The changes stay. Emily stays. The cost is real. Daniel loses support from a few long-standing allies. Influence shifts, expectations harden, but something else strengthens. When Emily sees Daniel afterward, she does not thank him. She simply says, "You chose integrity." He nods. "So did you, when you did not disappear." That night, both of them understand something fundamental has changed. Healing, they realize, is not complete until it is defended. And this time, neither of them stands alone. The weeks that follow are quieter, but they are not easier. After the board decision, the company does not celebrate. There is no announcement, no victory speech. Change settles in slowly, resisted in small ways by habit and skepticism. Emily feels it in the hesitations, the guarded questions, the moments when people wait to see if the new standards will truly hold. She does not push, she steadies. Her work now focuses on integration rather than correction. She listens, she gathers feedback, she adjusts processes where they strain instead of forcing them into place. Healing, she knows, cannot be imposed. It has to be supported long enough to prove it is real. Daniel stands behind her decisions, even when they are inconvenient. When a senior manager complains about reduced flexibility to demand overtime, Daniel responds plainly. When a department requests an exception to old practices, he asks why the exception is necessary. He does not shield Emily from scrutiny, but he does not leave her exposed to it either. Trust, Emily realizes, feels different when it is practiced publicly. One afternoon, months after her collapse, she finds herself standing in the same hallway where everything changed. The lights are bright, the floor polished. The office feels alive, but not frantic. She pauses there longer than she expects. She remembers how she felt that night. The dizziness, the fear she ignored, the certainty that stopping meant failing. She breathes in, steady now, and continues walking. Later that day, Daniel asks her to meet him on the rooftop terrace. It is a space rarely used, overlooking the city skyline. The air is cool, the noise distant. "I wanted to thank you," he says, not formally, not as a superior, but as a man who understands the weight of the words. "For what?" she asks. "For staying," he answers, "and for holding your ground when it would have been easier not to." Emily considers this. "You made it possible to stay," she says, "without disappearing." He nods. "That was not easy for me." "I know," she replies. They stand in silence, comfortable now, no longer defined by hierarchy alone. The city stretches below them, complex and alive. "I used to believe leadership meant never letting people see uncertainty," Daniel says. "Now I think it means naming it before it causes harm." Emily smiles slightly. "I used to believe value meant endurance," she says. "Now I know it means honesty." Neither of them speaks for a while. What has grown between them is not sudden or dramatic. It is deliberate, built on choice, on the decision to meet each other as equals, shaped by different experiences but aligned in purpose. As the sun dips lower, Daniel turns to her. "There is something else," he says, "something personal." Emily waits, open but grounded. "I care about you," he says, "not because of what you give to this company, but because of who you are when you are no longer silent." The words are simple. They do not ask for anything. They do not promise what cannot be guaranteed. Emily feels them settle, not as pressure, but as recognition. "I care about you too," she says honestly, "because you learn to listen." They do not rush forward. They do not define the moment more than it needs to be. Healing, they both know, is not complete when it is hurried. As they leave the terrace together, the city lights beginning to glow, Emily feels something she once thought was unreachable. Not rescue, not relief, but balance. And for the first time, she trusts it will last. The changes hold. Not perfectly, not without effort, but they hold long enough to become real. Months pass, and the company no longer speaks about transformation as a phase. It becomes a standard. New hires are trained under different expectations. Managers are evaluated not only on output, but on sustainability. Silence is no longer rewarded. Balance is no longer questioned. Emily settles into her role with quiet confidence. She no longer arrives before sunrise or leaves long after dark. Her days are full, but not consuming. When she speaks, she does so without rehearsing apologies in her head. When she rests, she does not justify it. Her health continues to improve. The fatigue that once defined her life fades into memory. Not forgotten, but understood. A reminder of what happens when care is delayed too long. Daniel Whitmore changes as well, though fewer people notice at first. He listens more. He asks questions he once assumed he already knew the answers to. He walks the floors of the building without an agenda, without urgency, simply present. Leadership, he learns, is not weakened by visibility. It is strengthened by it. Their relationship grows naturally, without pressure or spectacle. They share dinners after work, sometimes talking about the company, sometimes not. They learn each other's rhythms, each other's limits. There is no rush to define what they are becoming. Both of them understand what happens when things move faster than the body or the heart can sustain. One evening, as they walk through the city together, Daniel stops beneath a streetlight. The noise of traffic hums around them, steady and familiar. "I used to believe needing someone meant losing control," he says. "Now I understand it means trusting the right things." Emily looks at him, her expression calm, grounded. "And I used to believe being needed was the same as being valued," she replies. "Now I know the difference." They stand there for a moment, not as a billionaire and an employee, not as a leader and a subordinate, but as two people who have learned, the hard way, what it costs to ignore humanity. Their hands find each other naturally. No announcement, no promise beyond the present. Back at the office, Emily passes the corner where she once collapsed. The memory no longer tightens her chest. It reminds her how far she has come. She no longer works in silence. She works with clarity. The story of her collapse becomes something else over time. Not a warning whispered quietly, a lesson spoken openly. And for Daniel, the moment he finally spoke is not remembered as a weakness, but as the beginning of true leadership. Because healing, they both know now, is not a single event. It is a series of choices: to listen, to speak, to rest, to stay, and to never again confuse silence with strength. That is how the story ends, not with a dramatic declaration, but with a life that no longer needs to fall apart in order to be seen.